The following video contains spoilers. We suggest watching the episodes alone in the dark. Yard, she blows, Wolfpack. Catastrophe here, and when I'm not frolicking in the gardens to dump droppings, I'm sniffing around for terrific terror tales. It must be Goosebumps Eve, because you're getting another present already. And what better gift than a mega fan favorite epic that helped R.L. Stine's franchise branch into an even larger household name.
Stay out of the basement!
If you thought the Horrorland saga was a solid cornerstone of Goosebumps, well, we finally found the other corner. It goes without saying that Stay Out of the Basement is a massive icon for the Goosebumps brand, which billions upon billions of Goose fans adore like the world's largest flower. It's both considered a fantastic episode of the show, but also a classic book. This is right up there next to the Haunted Mask, Fever Swamp, and even Slappy in terms of popularity. Heck, even R.L. Stine himself actually campaigned for the studio to immediately adapt this book for the show right when production first began, since he considered this one of his personal favorites. Yes, this story is so good that R.L. Stine was demanding it make the cut first season. You know a story has to be epic if the creator is pushing on the network for once.
Steve King wishes he could write like me.
And honestly, I fully understand why, since this is legit a true Goosebumps masterpiece, full of such visceral imagery, uneasy tension, eerie atmosphere, creative horror, a fun sense of sci-fi, and what many consider to be one of Stine's creepiest premises, especially from a child's perspective. Fans genuinely clamor that it might be the scariest episode of the entire series.
Hold on there, Jethro!
Don't get me wrong, but I question this. I mean, we've seen symbiote demon masks, corrupt prison schools, alien pumpkin heads who eat people, and a monster stranger danger tale. But fans really argue that this is the top dog.
Lady, you're nuts.
Well, consider my curiosity intrigued. Based on the dozens of requests we've had for this episode, and the fact that this always makes top 10 lists, you can tell this is no small pedal. This episode was such a big deal that, believe it or not, the original writer Sean Kelly had additional aid from the showrunners Billy Brown and Dan Angel themselves, who ghost wrote a lot of this script, as they really wanted the best book to be served justice. Sean Kelly's mostly known for writing children's shows, so I can only theorize that the main boys got involved to grant this tale that edge, which made Goosebumps' darker episodes so slick. So, technically, we had 3 writers stirring the pot, which is usually a bad sign in some works, yet we'll see how that fared well on screen real soon. For all you book fans wondering how faithful this project is to its seed form, you'll be happy to know that it remained very faithful to its roots. There are some big differences here and there, which are vastly off course of the book's blueprints, but to be fair, it does still capture the story greatly enough that it impressed both show and book audiences without fail.
Woo!
However, your snarky internet kitty is here to see how well it holds up as a good scary story, to truly see if this classic earned its prized ribbon. A lot of fan love waters over this flower, but Grumpy Cat has had his cold criticisms before, so let's see how it blossoms. Was this tale truly a gorgeous rose worthy of the horror genre's bouquet? Or is it a hideous weed that needs to be plucked out? Grab your weed killer and battle axes, because it's time to trim the lawn. This is our wacky review on the fan favorite Goosebumps 2-parter, Stay Out of the Basement.
You don't know what you're messing with. You got no idea. You don't know what you're looking at when you're looking here.
So, our episode opens up instantly unlike the book, where we're quickly introduced to our main characters, the Brewer family. A key difference here is that in the book, Stine gave us time to get to know the cast and their daily routines, as the plot's nightmare takes place over the course of a few weeks. However, the episode dives right into the setting by having Mama Brewer take off to help their Aunt Eleanor recover at the local hospital. A pretty smart choice, as we already set up the drama of the Brewer home and have the kids instantly endangered when left alone with a sketchy father figure. Speaking of which, the Brewer clan are undergoing a rift in their family home. As the mother's forced to leave for a while, the Brewer kids Margaret and Casey are depressed, and Papa Brewer has changed. We learn that Mr. B's a former professor of botany who's recently been fired by his institution, so he's trying to regain his job back by forcing some kind of miraculous breakthrough in his subject to amaze the science department.
What does he do down there anyway?
He's a botanist. He studies plants.
I know that, but all the time?
Unfortunately, only thing he's grown is obsessed with his experimenting, to the point of working 24/7 and sealing himself away down in the deep, dark, ominous basement, which is breaking the family love.
I'm worried about Dad. He's been acting so weird lately.
He's under a lot of pressure, Margaret.
But he never has time for me anymore. He's even stopped calling me princess.
And the cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon. Little boy blue and the man on the moon. When you're coming home, Dad, I don't know when, but we'll get together then.
This is one of the rare Stine stories where one of the parents is vital to the plot, as Dr. Brewer's relationship with the kids is the emotional crux of the entire arc. And as you can tell, he's heavily tied to the spooky basement. Exactly like The Haunted Mask, this story also has heavy emotional storytelling, which the kids definitely feel for, as Margaret and Casey spend every minute worrying about their distant dad, questioning if he cares for them anymore, but also confront some unsettling hardships. As a fan of Toy Train and the Funhouse, I really enjoy it, since it makes the story super deep compared to the typical Monster of the Week formula. It's quickly felt that dear old dad's becoming a different man.
Stay out of the basement!
He said it! Dr. Brewer warns his kids to steer clear of his mystery lab before he steers Mom off to the hospital, leaving the kids alone. This Goosebumps two-parter surprisingly has a minimal cast, but the acting's quite good for the most part. The adults all do terrific jobs to make the story feel real, especially Judah Katz as the father, with how he seamlessly flips the switch between creepy weirdo to a seemingly caring father, almost as if he were two different personas. But
That comes later.
our main kid heroes, Casey and Margaret on the other paw, sadly suffer from Drake Bell syndrome. They're not exactly great at the start, having some funny wooden line reads, and simply running through the motions. But as the story goes on, and once the weirdness haunts them, they suddenly become good. It's so odd, since they aren't very convincing when they pretend to be normal, but when terror time commences, they turn on Jenna Ortega mode.
What are you doing?
Shh. I'm scared, Casey. I saw something last night. I don't like this, Casey. I don't like it one bit.
Dad!
Most of the actors in this aren't in stuff I'm familiar with, except Margaret, who's played by evil teenage brat Corrine Howling from How I Got My Shrunken Head. So you know our protagonist is at least decent, since she returned for a later Goosebumps tale as another major kid character. Personality-wise, Casey's simply the zany goofball younger sibling who bounces off of our hero, while Margaret is a daddy's girl who's sad that her pa is cold towards her for seemingly no reason, where she evolves into a kid detective to solve the case. A bit of a rocky start, but the episode quickly picks up speed, and the child acting clearly does get better. The episode compresses book events, so the plot can flow slightly better in TV format, and some characters are omitted, such as the wacky neighbors and Margaret's BFF Diane. Almost all the interactions are solely between the Brewer family, which I think greatly improves the story, since the kids feel a lot more isolated and alone when stuck with a dad who's drifting away from them, as well as trapped with the spookiness under their floor. It's definitely a prime example of good changes, since we fear for the kid heroes way more knowing that they're on their own, with who knows what in that basement.
Sure, this house is big, but it's also very intimate. Intimate.
So we're really gonna live here now?
Intimate.
While playing the Camp Nowhere video game, the kids hear peculiar noises from the scary room, peeving their curiosity.
Did you hear it?
Maybe it's the wind.
Has a strange noise in a horror story ever been just the wind? You people need to learn how to genre savvy.
Probably just the wind.
They think there's a dying animal stuck in the basement, where they, of course, look inside, finding their dad's weed farm.
You know where you are? You're in the jungle, baby!
Naturally, the basement is the most unnerving set of the whole episode, and clearly where all the money went. Brewer's brewery is a botany lab, with an almost alien light, overgrown plants everywhere to simulate a forest, test tubes, mad scientist equipment, and such a bizarre space that you never can tell exactly how big it is. Even when the kids aren't exploring it, there's an uneasy atmosphere spreading from it, as the father is concocting some poison ivy schemes inside 24/7, and you get the feeling that something deadly is trying to escape from the darkness. Really eerie stuff, though the lab is vastly different from the novels. In the book, Stine describes the brewery as only being part greenhouse. There's bright lights everywhere to simulate sunlight, high-tech machinery, gene splicers, and it looks more like a Men in Black lab, to imply that brewery was cooking something more than dank weed, but almost supervillain levels of work. I presume the show changed it to this alien-looking lab to create a vastly uncomfortable vibe, showing how the plants are dominating everything, and make the dad seem like he's growing disheveled himself, the longer he hangs out in this dark cave. Needless to say, the crew's redesign of the basement is super effective, which reminds me, the plant effects are equally super duper. Both the novel and episode add a sense of paranoia around the plants, as they always look unnatural, and display some menace of their own. The kids gawk at the freaky flora, where one grabs and mildly annoys Margaret, cutting her finger as she escapes. Which totally won't be important for later. But uh-oh, Daddy's home right when Casey remembers that he forgot his sweater downstairs, forcing him to retrieve it before Brewer unlocks the door. It's a very minor change, but in the book, Casey took off his whole shirt, while the episode alters it to just his sweater, likely to avoid any little boy nudity.
Oh, rats!
Luckily, they both take their sweet, slow time as Casey scours the jungle while Dad stops to inspect the flowers? Could this be that clever foreshadowing? But they're too late as Dad crosses their path and he rather abrasively interrogates them.
You in the basement?
We heard some noises.
Like someone was crying.
Go into the basement.
We were scared. The noises were strange and...
The basement. 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 Basement.
I just love how Judah emphasizes basement.
Basement.
They fess up, but their dad actually comforts them and explains things in a way that does throw off some suspicion. He admits he's working on a top secret project that'll help save his career, which is why he can't spend time with them anymore, and he's hard on them because he needs them to stay away, as it's dangerous. He's simply protecting them. We of course know there's more to this, as the basement just gets creepier and creepier. But like in the book, it does make you question what's going on, as Dr. Brewer is seemingly a nice guy for now, because he hasn't gone off the deep end yet. Though he doesn't quite answer everything either, so you know something's up.
I'm doing something a little bit more unusual. I can't tell you what it is right now.
We're certainly not building something sinister, if that's what you're implying. Now come on, Bender. Something sinister won't build itself.
They all work things out, but our homegirl still suspects Dad's amiss. In part 1, Brewer is a total wild card, as he does explain some antics, yet never 100%. Throughout the two-parter, we catch glimpses of Dr. Brewer doing vague things in his den, which don't reveal too much, but adds fuel to the basement fear. I swear, this tale inspired a certain scary Batman episode. Margaret frequently attempts to bond with dodgy daddy, but alas, he keeps distancing himself from her even further.
We'll get together then. You know we'll have a good time then.
And if the basement doesn't scare you, then don't fret. Dr. Brewer himself keeps the creepy sprinklers on, like when our hero spots him eating plant food, acting feral for a man of science, and watering himself. Never date a vegetarian, kids. Worried over Dr. Dad, she desperately calls Mom for help, but unfortunately can't reason with her. So Dad comforts her by acting more ominous, which, big shock, only reignites Margaret's fear.
I hope Aunt Eleanor starts feeling better.
You know I'm allergic to love!
If it isn't blatant, the creepy basement is actually not the main source of fear. Dr. Brewer, the father watching over the protagonist, is the real antagonist of the episode, as the plot implies he's linked to some dark secrets going on within the basement, which are affecting both the trust and safety of our kid heroes. Dr. Brewer's actor Judah Katz absolutely steals the show with his off-putting, borderline mood swinger performance as he captures the character's unsettling unpredictability. Despite Dr. Brewer's questionable antics, the guy's shrouded in mystery for all of part 1. We're in the dark about his true motives until later in the final battle. His decaying relationship with the kids adds an almost Thing level of trust drama, and the episode relishes in this primal fear most people have of being stuck in a situation with somebody who doesn't have the well-being of innocent people at top priority, making you dread where it's going. Judah's acting is undoubtedly the best in this, as he brings Dr. Brewer to life as this sketchy weirdo, and the plot loves toying with the audience over whether or not he's going to do something against his snoopy kids or not.
You're not a mad scientist, are you, Dad?
No, I'm an angry scientist.
It's a truly primal fear that both adults and especially children feel, since the dad's unhinged behavior grows worse and worse as the show continues. So scary that it almost eclipses the titular mystery box. Like in the novella, part 1 wisely doesn't show you its full deck yet, but it does entrance you with the mystery behind Daddy's out-of-character alert, and goes for a very clever yet gross misdirection. When Dad isn't being sinister, the show loves the fright-sgusting body horror.
Get out! thought this was a part just for the men.
One night, Margaret spots Dad bleeding mutagen ooze and growing leaves out of his head, nearly getting caught. Brewer falls for her trick, but Margie's very much afraid of the dad she idolized by now. Much like in the novel, we're meant to believe that Dr. Brewer is mutating into some kind of monster, which is totally a reality in the realm of Goosebumps, but it's a crafty Stine mislead. Luckily, it does instantly heat up the tension. The kids grow paranoid of Pa as Brewer gets more angry and colder. Aside from brief glimpses at PG body horror, the scenes where the kids and their dad interact are far scarier, as they're so intense since you can't tell what the father's angle is, and the children have no clue if they can even trust Dad anymore.
I saw you last night. In the bathroom.
Spying on me?
No. I mean that...
No. You're just concerned about me.
What child isn't afraid of a parent turning against them? Brewer finally explains that there's no need to worry. He's simply suffering temporary side effects from his secret project. He seeks to create the ultimate life form, an artificial hybrid being, part plant and part animal, in order to regain his job and reward his family the high life by achieving a revolutionary scientific breakthrough.
I'm trying to build a plant that is part animal.
I pray this doesn't end in baby plant chimeras. Big shock, all this talk about playing God only drives the rift between them even further as the kids question this new baby. And Dad proves he's trustworthy by forcing them to eat expired Nickelodeon slime for breakfast. If you kids weren't afraid to eat your veggies already, this'll help you join the meat side. Brewer even gets hostile when they refuse, demanding they obey, only giving them some terror proteins instead. Spoiler alert, we never find out what that gross mutagen and cheese is. But going along with the plant motifs, I think it's some kind of radioactive plant food, like the father was eating earlier, and he's forcing the kids to become mutants like him by eating it. Just another scene to highlight how Floronic Man isn't Father of the Year.
What's the matter with you two? Pick up your spoons and eat it.
Mom, is Dad gonna kill us?
We're just gonna have to wait and see.
Luckily, this ain't no old story, as they're saved by the bell when Brewer's old boss drops by to chat, allowing them to flush the pot. This bit character is Brewer's science partner, Dr. Merrick, who's here to see the dad's experiments to decide if he's worthy of science council again. Now, in the book, this coworker was actually a Hispanic guy named Dr. Martinez, but the show randomly race changes him to an old Armenian dude named Dr. Merrick. I'm not sure why the name had to be changed, but I guess Canada just has a low supply of Latino actors. Or R.L. Stine's probably a huge Yu-Gi-Oh fan. Dr. Brewer works things out with his old boss while the kids play outside. In the book, they were playing baseball, but apparently Stine gave the showrunners the memo after The Girl Who Cried Monster to switch the pastime sports around. And finally got his frisbee scene.
Small plastic disc that you throw. Small plastic disc that you throw.
While dual disking, Casey overhears the adults fighting and screaming, but before getting a good look, he's attacked by poison ivy vines, ending part 1. Exactly like Perfect School and The Haunted Mask, the first chapter is terrific build-up, where the true conflict hasn't fully revealed yet, but the horror is quickly letting you know that it's rooted and ready to spread. Despite the kids entering the basement early on, we still don't know what evil lurks within the plants, nor know what really happened to turn their dad from loving Professor Utonium into the Floronic Man yet. However, we do get acquainted with the Brewer family, so we at least care for what happens to them, know that killer plants are involved, and get to see the dad's descent into madness, as we quickly understand he no longer has the family's best interests at heart. So I can say it did a good job, as part 2 is where the baby sapling overgrows into a nightmare forest, as the plot gets more dark and twisted from this point on. Part 2 opens up with Margaret saving Casey from Cleopatra just in time. But before he can warn her what he saw, Dad jump scares them and bluntly lies, claiming it's all good and Merrick went home to Odeon.
Casey heard a fight in the basement.
There was no fight.
But I heard it.
I'm telling you, there was no fight.
And it's here where I think I put together why this villain works. From a child's point of view, Dr. Brewer's super scary since he's a once loving parent slowly morphing into a monster. But from an adult's POV, Dr. Brewer's super scary because he actually comes across like a domestic abuser. I mean, really think about it. Dr. Brewer was a once loving man who cared for his family and worked a high quality job as a man respected by all. But he's now a lost wash-up, he's grown bitter and more private about himself, distances himself from his worried loved ones, doesn't seem to care about anyone or anything, his concern for the plants over his family appears selfish, he's addicted, and he grows more and more hostile and threatening towards his own kids for questioning him. Heck, even his mutation of literally becoming a gross monster, barely hidden under normalcy, could be interpreted as a metaphor over how the dad's seemingly noble front is chipping away, revealing the grim freak he really is. I legit think Dr. Brewer's such a horrifying villain is because the episode draws a lot of parallels to abusive households, as he turns against his family more and more to the point of being a bigger threat than the mystery in the basement. Like the Twilight Zone, it's a horrific idea only amplified stronger thanks to alluding to some realistic terror in a creative way. Seriously, as a kid he is ghoulish because we know he's a once poor guy transforming into a supernatural monster, but as an adult, this episode manages to be even scarier since Brewer really comes across as a genuine real-world horror.
Where's Dr. Merrick?
Just left.
I didn't see him leave.
Are you interrogating me, Margaret?
No.
I can see why Dr. Brewer still remains as one of the saga's most unsettling mofos, and if you don't trust me, don't worry, you'll see more examples. Dad grounds the kids, but just like that, the duo know he's very unwell.
No shit, Sherlock.
Brewer does more totally non-evil lab tests on his secret project, but we still can't say that he did anything bad to Merrick. Oops, sorry kitties, I got a call. Hello?
Hola, this is an anonymous tip from El Gato Rosa. Dr. Merrick is dead.
Ay caramba! And if Dad stripping old men doesn't scare you, things only get worse when the kids see Pups sealing the basement, acting even darker than last. Again, if you don't see this villain as an abuser, these minor scenes where we don't see any plant hijinks definitely display it.
I put locks on the basement windows from the inside, so don't try getting in through there either. Stop gawking at me.
I will come back there, and so help me God, I will hit you with my ring hand.
Scared out of their wits, they try calling for help when Dad's away, but he removed all the phone number lists. And their phone line.
Don't use the phone, because I just cut the line. Later, haters.
I know I should feel scared by how alone the kids are in this mess, but I can't help but question, why is Casey eating a jar of peanut butter? Seriously, they're afraid their abusive dad is psycho, and he's just vibing and eating a peanut butter jar. He doesn't even put it on a sandwich or anything. He eats it right out of the jar, like pudding. What kid does that? Now the family can never finish their jelly sandwiches. The two don't even know their dad anymore, and fearing the worst, they look for clues where the evidence piles on, suggesting the dock's a mess. I do love this short plant fake out where Margaret digs for clues, and you think the potted tree is going to do something or strangle her mid-search, but nope, it's just a normal plant that does nothing. Very clever writers. They do hear a message from Dr. Merrick's wife, asking all his friends if they've seen her husband, since he never came home and is missing. Yeesh, this got dark, and delightfully it gets darker. Once more, Dad returns as the kids try to cover their tracks. It's super suspenseful since they know Dad's unstable now, and Casey tries to distract him while Margaret's forced to hide under his nose. Right when Daddy goes super freak. He even molts worms from himself. This is peak PG body horror. But we still can't prove he did anything bad to Merrick.
Oh, really? Then what's that in his pocket?
Holy cow, did he kill Dr. Merrick? They actually tease the dad murdered a guy. Man, I miss the 90s. Kids shows had balls back then. This is scary awesome. Also, as Goose fans pointed out, Dr. Merrick's driver's license confirms that this episode takes place in New York instead of California like in the book. Most likely because New York is close by to Canada. Because isn't that what you all noticed about this scene? The area the cast lives in, and not the fact that the dad abducted some poor schmo.
Canadians are weird.
Dad goes out again, odd, since he just got back for the 12th time. But whatever, he needs to sell magic weed to Poison Ivy, as he leaves the kids alone. Where they finally confirm that Dad's not Dad when they see what's under his covers.
Hey, what happened to my bed?
Yeah, that's my funk. Leave it alone, it's resting.
Oh, that's sick. For a bottle episode taking place entirely in one house, there's some excellent effects in this. If Go Eat Worms had these skills, it probably wouldn't have been the most hated episode. So yeah, pause a clicker. Tired of all this BS, the kids gather their garden arsenal for some weed killing, and go phantasm on the basement. We explore the nightmare room once more, but now the plants have tripled in size and in hostility. Huge props to this episode's effects and sets teams, as the supernatural mutant plants are brought to power with more sickly green glow, gnarly sound effects, and very marvelous puppets when they try attacking the kids. While some book designs are missing, the body horror is through the roof, as we do see disembodied human parts morphed with leaf DNA, including the violent plant which cut Margaret earlier. It apparently absorbed her human blood and grew so much it now sports her face. Sweet Celestia, that's warped. Another fine example of Goosebumps' top-tier visuals and creativity, as the hard work on the plant Muppets really delivers one demented puppet show. Even Batman would be afraid of these Poison Ivy fans.
You're on your own, kid.
The spooky basement truly pays off as a trippy spook show that's stuck in children's minds for ages. It helps that it does have vital plot importance too. They kill the margweed, but this explains the big twist. The flora are so highly evolved that they only need a drop of human DNA in order to grow into a human-plant hybrid, capable of thought, free will, and unchained movement, exactly like Dr. Brewer wanted. If it isn't obvious, this foreshadows that this is what happened to their dad, and why he's acting strange. Dr. Brewer has been infected by the plants, and thanks to one of them exchanging DNA with him in one of his experiments, it grew a life of its own and stole his life. Dr. Brewer is a pod person. Before we continue towards that epic death battle, I do have to inform you that this was another mixed element fans felt over the book, whether or not the plant dad was truly evil or not. In the book, Clone Brewer actually had a similar fan defense as Mr. Mortman, where it's not precisely clear how evil he is, since the plant monster stole Brewer's life because it just wanted to feel alive and know what it was like to have a family. The plant clone never fatally harms anyone in the book, but did do some questionable things in order to maintain the facade. Some fans miraculously don't think he was irredeemably evil, but only sought freedom.
We're monsters, but we're not monsters.
I would honestly say that book Plant Man felt more like Clone Brain from Invader Zim. He's clearly a bad imposter, but he didn't have deeply malicious intent, and him pretending to be their dad is played more for dark comedy, as it's so obvious he can't take care of human kids and epic fails.
I'm taking care of it. These my kids are dying to stuff.
Yet, exactly like Mr. Mortman, the show totally fixes this by removing all innocence and making Plant Dad flat out evil, as he's not a poor soul who didn't know better, but a lunatic forcing this on the kids, gaslighting them, threatening them, attacking those in his way, and doing everything he can to keep up the charade. Personally, I'm glad this was altered, since it makes the villain all the more villainous, as he's not just a creation gone wrong, but a disturbed psychopath who's more of a menace towards everyone, as he's been holding this innocent family hostage the whole time, and is planning on unleashing more of his kin upon the world to do Lord knows what. I'd much rather take the psychotic plant overlord forcing control upon the kids over the dangerous moron unwittingly endangering everyone by raising them like plants on accident, as it makes TV Brewer feel like the Goosebumps equivalent of Poison Ivy.
Well, that's your opinion. Probably the last one you'll ever have, too.
However, there's still more questions. The kids find Dr. Merrick's clothes where they check out the secret box, only to find their dad, a second dad, tied up in the secret string. Not taking chances, they interrogate him, where prisoner Brewer warns them that he's their real pa, and the other guy is his evil plant clone trying to identity theft him. He's truly been held in the basement for weeks, trapped in the closet next to Merrick and R. Kelly, so Plant Dad could use him for more DNA.
It wasn't me, it's a plant. It's a plant copy of me.
The fact that the Brewer family has been hanging out with a psychotic imposter the whole time makes rewatching the two-parter 1,000 times scarier, but this is only the first stem. We get another solid fake-out where Prison Dad grabs a weapon, but only to defend himself from the other father, who abruptly returns home one more time to defend his tykes from Dark Dad. Or is he?
He's a plant copy. One of my experiments that went wrong. I put him in there because he's dangerous. I'll spray him.
No. He's the copy. He's the dangerous one. He's trying to make plant copies of us all. Spray him!
And our big climax is the kids getting a which one is the real one dilemma, as the kids have to make a telltale choice in order to survive.
I don't know what to do! Give me that! Get back, both of you!
But ultimately, Margaret makes the right decision when Prison Dad calls her Princess, his pet name for her, something which Plant Dad never did. And Evil Dad dies.
Fatality.
This climax is pretty much the largest change from the book, as it plays out much differently on page. In the book, the cute princess nickname test is sorta tossed aside, in favor of a reference to The Thing. The Brewer fam does a more logical blood test to see who's who, where Plant Dad is exposed since he bleeds green ooze instead of human blood. And after breaking cover, the real dad murders the poser with an axe and chops him down like a tree, where fake Brewer meets a brutal end.
You know, for kids!
It's a frickin' savage ending, but it's more in favor of granting the father some satisfying closure where he slays the monster who terrorized his family. In my opinion, the episode totally improves upon this thanks to these changes. It focuses more on the kids, as they solve the mystery, they save their dad, and after weeks of being gaslit and mistreated by Psycho Dad, them slaying him is a lot more satisfying a payoff to their arc. It's a much more emotional climax, since the kids face their fears, stand up to the abuser, and win back their real loving father, since he proves he's the one who actually loves them.
How did you know? There's only one person who calls me princess. My real dad.
So, I'm very glad they changed, since it adds so much heart to this and gives good vibes. While I am sad this family picture wasn't able to show us gruesome dismemberment, Plant Dad getting vaporized by acid is still equally as brutal.
I'm melting! Melting!
A pretty badass death battle, Stine. And that's it. Everything's good again. The Brewers have regrown. They're happily ever after. Real Brewer and Dr. Merrick live. Dad shaves his leaf head. The mom takes it very well that her kids lived with a mutant freak for days. The doc gets rehired. And Brewer finally gives up his crap crops in order to spend more time with his family.
Life had never been sweeter.
In the book, Dr. Brewer actually burns down all his mutant plants, but the show alters it to him donating them to Dr. Merrick for lab lockup. Most likely because the show wanted to reveal that Merrick was okay, and grant us this explanation monologue.
But I was wrapped up in my work. Then I went too far. I created a plant that was an exact copy of me.
You accept that it was evil.
Well, to us, yes, but like most organisms, it wanted to dominate its environment.
It's an okay change, since it informs us on all the missing deets and allows more cuteness with the family as they get their happy reunion. Alas, nothing will ever bring back those poor peanut butter jars.
Don't cry for me. I'm already dead.
But right when everything's coming up Millhouse, we get our twist ending.
Psst, Margaret. Margaret, help me. Please help me. I'm your father. I'm your real father. Real father.
Oh, I'm your father.
No, I'm your father.
I'm your father.
Yep, Margaret gets called upon by a bouquet of dadfodills who all claim to be her father, teasing that the nightmare's far from over.
Once again, the saga continues.
In the book, only one single flower begs Margaret for help, but the show alters it to a dozen peddlers trying to con her, likely because rule of scary. According to the Goosebumps wiki, the show actually did film the book ending where it was only one plant, yet I believed they altered it just to give us more freaky puppets and enhance the dark ambiguous finale. Good idea, but if the dad mailed the plants away, then how are there so many evil mutants still around?
That boy Carl jerk off in the cabbages again?
He sure did.
Actually, I do have a theory about this. I think the plant dad was really spreading his essence upon all the outside garden back at the start, simply to foreshadow this twist. We know he's been trying to recreate the house as a plant environment, so I think he was devising a clone army, which now the Brewers are stuck with. Stine wanted to fake us out again by making you question if this Brewer is the real deal, but I think he's the actual dad, and the plants are all liars, since both stories do give more evidence leading towards the prison Brewer being true. Not a bad ending, but definitely a decent unnerving one, hinting that their weeds are regrowing.
You are not.
Anywho, that's the end of the fan favorite flower, Stay Out of the Basement. And in spite of some huge changes and iffy moments, it still holds its value as a successful experiment. I'm Serial. After all this time, and even after revisiting so many Goosebumps legends, Stay Out of the Basement remains amazingly as a staple of children's horror. While I personally find the haunted mask in the House of No Return far scarier, there's some truly inventive and unsettling dread underneath this gorgeous flower. Clone Brewer really is one of the biggest skin-crawling monsters. The body horror, while tame, is quite nasty. The plant gimmick adds a striking visual flair. The practical effects are some of the show's gnarliest. The family drama's genuinely compelling for once. The psychological fear of losing somebody you once loved is just as powerful as the sci-fi. It's a very loving adaptation of a book children love. The horror of a child stuck living under a dangerous threat is grueling suspense. All the cast, especially Judah Katz, bring the characters alive, and underneath what could have been a generic monster of the week tale lies a pretty terrific cautionary fable of children standing up against an abuser, ultimately facing their fears by venturing into their deceptions. In this case, an eerie basement. R.L. Stine considers this one of his favorite stories, and I can see why, as it feels like a family-friendly version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, plus The Thing. I sadly don't agree it's greater than the book, but equally as good as it. The show does heavily alter book moments, but in this case, it's a perfect example of changing events for the better, as not once does it take away from the original's greatness, and many of these new ideas actually made it even better than on the page. This is also one of the rare Goosebumps adventures where there's genuine heart and fun that the kids can enjoy, almost to the same levels as Carly Beth or Ghost Hannah. While Margaret and Casey aren't deep protagonists, there's a sense of relatability to them as all they want is their dad back, and you do truly root for them as they uproot a nightmare poisoning their lives, ultimately giving a great horror story of them going from poor victims haunted by a monster to combating the monster in its dark cave of a basement to get their happy ending back. It's an old-fashioned hero's journey, but makes confronting the basement's dangers all the more interesting. The upgrades to Clone Brewer also make him just as twisted and creepy as Mr. Mortman, since they took an already bizarre creature and reinvented him as a sick madman that the kids need to take down. As I sung in praise, Judah Katz is what made this character stick out more, since he plays two impressively polar opposite Brewers, and gives both the unwelcoming fear of a sketchy boogeyman and heartwarming love of a caring father superbly.
I'm your real father. He's not your dad. He's not even human. He's a plant. You're the plant.
The plot overall is both a ludicrous body horror of a mad scientist story and a mystery of two kids desperately trying to uncover the truth, if their loving dad is the same man they once loved or not. Mixed together with a fun sci-fi premise of killer plants, Stay Out of the Basement just grows more and more insane as it goes on, until it blossoms all these intriguing concepts as one delightful story. I love it, and can safely say that the episode has earned its fan love for being a true entryway horror masterpiece into both horror sci-fi and psychological drama. Stay Out of the Basement might only be the second book of the series, but to many people, it'll always be their #1 rose. So, I grant this episode a gold skull and a perfect score. This is absolutely one of the scariest titles of the series, and another iconic name which made this franchise a franchise to begin with. Wicked scares, timeless storytelling, a disturbing baddie, intense paranoia, rad effects, and even a message about loving family. Stay Out of the Basement is one rare flower you'll want for your garden. I'm your host, Kat. What the? Who the heck are you? Ladies and gentlemen, you've been had. This cat is an impostor. Yeah. Pinky, get the axe.
Better wait a minute. Better hold the phone. Better mind your manners. Better change your tone. Don't you threaten me, son. You gotta let her go. We're gonna do things my way, or we won't do things at all. You don't know what you're messing with. You got no idea. You don't know what you're looking at. When you're looking here, you don't know what you're messing with. Don't know way, no how. You don't know what you're looking at. But I'm gonna tell you straight. I'm just a mean green mother from outer space, and I